All right, so the question is, what is the crypto trilemma? Trilemma, as you can guess, it means three things. It's also known as the blockchain trilemma. And this term was coined by Vitalik, the founder, or one of many founders of Ethereum, and it's talking about a trade-off. So, if you're not aware, but in any kind of system design, sort of to do with computing, and even in the real world, other types of design, there are often trade-offs, and there may not be a right way to design something. It's all about what are the trade-offs that you're willing to accept. Are you gonna focus on one thing over another? You know, what are you willing to make better at the expense of something else? And that's down to preference, right? So that's what the blockchain or the crypto trilemma is. There's three fundamental properties of a blockchain network. There's security, scalability, and decentralization. So I'll just expand on what those three things are, right? So security, you can probably tell what that is, but it's all about how how robust the blockchain network is. How resistant is it to attack? And security, of course, is absolutely crucial in terms of trust. If a network is not secure, who's going to use it to put at stake their money? You know, to use this blockchain network, this crypto, as a medium of exchange? Pretty much nobody, right? So the transactions must be ensured to be valid and that they cannot change. So that's security. It's absolute, one of the, probably the most important thing out of all three: security, scalability, decentralization. Security has got to be the most important thing there. I don't think you could have any crypto out there that could have low security, and pretty much nobody would use it. So almost all of them are going to have very high security, or you know, you could call it medium, but it's still pretty high. That would be the alternative choice. Now the next one is scalability. So this is quite a modern term today in terms of digital, especially cloud computing and all that kind of stuff. Scalability means ability to scale. What do we mean by that? Ability to go from low number of users to a high number of users, but without sort of falling apart at the seams as the number of users goes higher and higher. So that's what it's about. And you know, you can't really have a crypto that is a victim of its own success. Everyone thinks it's great, more people pile in, and suddenly it starts falling apart. This is kind of what happened with Solana a few years ago. It became a victim of its own success. The network went down, I think, a couple of times. It just completely went offline. I mean, even now, Solana, sometimes when you're attempting to do like a swap or something, if it's really busy, sometimes it'll just fail. Now, I'm not blaming that entirely on Solana, because there's a lot of moving parts to when you do a swap. But the fact is, it can be at times far less reliable than, say, doing a swap with a DEX like Uniswap on Ethereum. That's just a straight up fact, right? So scalability is very important. If you know, it's okay, it doesn't matter. You don't need scalability if something's going to remain very niche and will never go mainstream. And there are a few coins like that, and the people who use them, the small communities that use them, they're perfectly happy with it. But if a coin is going to become popular, it needs to be able to handle it. So that's scalability. Now the third one is decentralization, and this is pretty much like a core principle of blockchain tech, crypto tech, etc. And the idea is with decentralization, so it's the opposite of centralization. Decentralization means spread out, sprawling. It means it's very difficult for a single or a small group of entities to take over the network. And by being decentralized, it will help the integrity of the network, because nobody can sort of have ulterior motives and try to seize power. It also means as well that it's not going to be a censored network. So those are the three things: security, scalability, and decentralization. And they're all a trade-off. You cannot have all three maxed out. It's just one of those things that it just appears, at least with the current technology, to be impossible. And by all means, if you want to invent a crypto that can do all three maxed out, all three high, you'll probably have the most successful crypto ever invented. But it's been 15 years since the invention of crypto and blockchain with Bitcoin, and no one has come up with a coin that does all three. So in all likelihood, it's probably impossible. Now, you may have heard of layer 2. So smart contract chains like Ethereum, like Solana, like Cardano, Binance chain, etc. There was a time when a lot of people were complaining about the fees being really high, and to be honest, that's only part of it, the fees. But you know what basically happened was, it was determined that layer 1 just couldn't scale. Once it got popular, it just couldn't scale anymore, and there needed to be some way to reduce the burden on the main chain and ease the congestion. And the solution, I don't know who invented this, but the solution that came up was something called layer 2. So the idea with layer 2 is layer 2 can handle more throughput. It can actually even confirm transactions way quicker, like in a matter of seconds. And eventually, and there's a variety of ways of doing it, but it kind of rolls up or batch in some kind of batch way, wraps these things up and puts them back onto layer 1. When you go to layer 2, there still eventually has to be some kind of closing the loop, and in a way not replaying but sort of doing your administration and putting back on layer 1 to make it good. From the user perspective, there's the user experience. You don't have to worry about that. That's all in the technology and the design. But yeah, in the end, layer 2 is quite highly evolved. It's quite mature now. There's a lot of different layer 2s. Of course, some are more popular than others. A lot of different ways to do it. I think what will happen in future is eventually that will consolidate, and that there will be a small group of winners. But at the moment, there's a lot of layer 2, so it's not really mature tech. It's kind of halfway there, and only time will tell which ones are going to win out. But there's no doubt that they've been a success so far. One thing I would say is I used layer 2s not so long ago, thinking that they would be more mature in terms of the ecosystem. So I went to Uniswap, which is the biggest DEX, decentralized exchange on Ethereum, and I was using one of the biggest layer 2s, which was Arbitrum 1, and I expected to find a lot of pairs to be able to swap on this particular layer 2, one of the biggest ones. And when I got there, I was pretty disappointed actually at the coin selection. So there was hardly any liquidity. So this tells me that that it's suffering in a way. People are using it, but the number of use cases is nowhere near as diverse as you would find on layer 1. So I was pretty disappointed by that, I've got to say. But anyway, they've kind of, they have gone a long way to solve the problems of the congestion on layer 1. So that's layer 2s. Some people have theorized, when layer 2s get congested, we'll have layer 3s and layer 4s and layer 5s. I frankly think that argument is ridiculous. I think it's going to make a mess of the network. I don't see that as the future. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a developer on any smart contract chain, but I honestly think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think that's a mess. I think it's bad enough that we already have to use layer 2s in a way. I know people will say, well, you got the trilemma. There's no way that you can have a perfect layer 1, and that's true. But as we'll see, there are other layer 1s that are challenging Ethereum. Ethereum maxis might say, well, we have the best layer 1, and we've achieved the best compromise, and our layer 2s fill in the gaps that our layer 1s could not, just simply due to the technology. And yet you've got these other smart contract chains like Solana now challenging Ethereum, and they're saying like, well, hey, we can do what you're able, what you need layer 2 for. We can do all that on our layer 1. So this idea that we need layer 3s and layer 4s, I honestly think that's just ridiculous. So anyway, let me give you some idea about going back again to this crypto trilemma. I want to give you a feel for it. I'm going to compare to you Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. So security, scalability, decentralization. Now Bitcoin is the most secure, the strongest coin of any out there. So its security is high. However, its scalability is low. I know what you're thinking. It's most popular. It's used by a lot of people, but it has low scalability. It's got a very low transaction throughput. It's about 7 transactions per second. It's tiny. It has small block size. It takes 10 minutes to get through one block. There's no way, even if you wanted to improve it, it just wouldn't work. It can't be improved. It has to stay at that level. So high security, low scalability. However, it has a high level of decentralization. I think there's about 20,000 nodes globally. So it has high security, low scalability, high decentralization. So it's the scalability where Bitcoin suffers. But that doesn't matter because it's digital gold, right? You can say the same thing about real gold. It's highly secure, it's highly decentralized, but that there's only so much that you can deliver per second, I guess. Now Ethereum, here's the difference. The security is also high, although Bitcoin maxis would say that's not true for Ethereum. It uses a different consensus mechanism called proof of stake. In general, it's regarded as high security by everybody who uses Ethereum. I think it's secure. Okay, I don't think it's at risk of any major attack. I'm not aware of any major attack on Ethereum. I personally think it's secure, but I understand why Bitcoin maxis would say it's not secure. Only proof of work can be secure and not proof of stake consensus mechanism. So I understand that, but let's park that thought and assume that it's high security for now. So what's the difference then in terms of the trade-offs between Bitcoin and Ethereum? Well, Ethereum has a higher scalability but a lower decentralization. So it definitely has a higher scalability than Bitcoin. That's not difficult. In fact, I would put that kind of medium level scalability. And of course you've got the layer 2s as well, which also help. But even regular ETH layer 1 has a higher scalability than Bitcoin. However, the decentralization is lower. And a lot of people suggest that that's because of proof of stake. So to validate transactions on Ethereum, you need to be what's called a validator. I believe you need something like 21 ETH to do that. So there's certain requirements. So you need to hold a lot of ETH. So you can already see that the people who validate Ethereum transactions are the whales, basically. And that's not a good thing, right? That's not decentralized. So it has better or increased scalability compared to Bitcoin, but lower decentralization. Now let's talk about Solana. Now, it is generally regarded that Solana has worse security than Bitcoin and Ethereum, and as I mentioned, that there have also been some network outages, which you could say is kind of proof of that. Now, what about as far as scalability? Well, on its layer 1, it has way better scalability than Bitcoin, or better to compare to something like for like, or Ethereum. It has amazing scalability. It can go up to like 65,000 transactions per second, right? It's way it's way better. Look at all the meme coin mania that's happened, and although there's the occasional time when it gets kind of congested, the volumes are incredible already. So it has the best scalability. It has better scalability than Ethereum. Yes, it sacrifices some security, people would argue, but its scalability is way up there. Now, what about in terms of centralization? Well, it's regarded in general as being quite low. Apparently it's got some kind of centralized structure. I don't know that much about it. It doesn't have as many nodes either. So you can see that there's quite a difference between different coins, and these are arguably trade-offs, probably by design. Some people might say by accident, but I think I would argue by design. If you're going to make a new smart contract chain crypto, you're not going to just copy what other existing ones are already doing. You're going to try and differentiate yourself, and part of that differentiation is choosing which out of the trilemma are you going to focus on? What are your, how are you going to play those trade-offs? So yeah, that is for you the answer to the question, what is the crypto trilemma? It's super interesting. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below. If you enjoyed this discussion, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.